What if we were able to create solutions to today's wicked environmental problems? What knowledge and expertise would we need?
Hi, welcome to the podcast Design for the Future. In this podcast, we explore environmental issues and how they might be solved through design thinking qualities. My name is Dr. Minjung Cho, Assistant Professor of Global Public Health at Leiden University College.
And my name is Nadia Teunissen. I am a sustainability anthropologist and I will be your host in the upcoming episodes.
In our episodes, we will talk with various stakeholders in the field of sustainability and innovation. They will provide valuable insights on sustainability issues, opportunities, and the skills we need to design for a better future. Why should you care? I think in the end, we all need to take responsibility in keeping our planet a healthy and prosperous place to live. What are your thoughts?
You're invited to sit back or take a walk while listening to our stories. We hope you get inspired. Why is creativity important for innovation? What does it actually mean to be a creative person? Can everyone be creative? These are the questions we will talk about in this episode. So today we will talk with an expert in the field of innovation and creativity, Alwin Veldboom. Alwin is Innovation Architect at Outside Inc. He will discuss with us today why creativity is important within the field of innovation and how we can unleash our own creative potential. Welcome Alwin.
Hi Nadia.
Hi, good to have you here.
Thank you.
So as I said in the introduction, you are an innovation architect. I don't know what it is. So maybe could you tell us a bit more about this and about yourself?
Yeah, sure. First of all, thanks for inviting me to have this conversation about creativity. Happy to share my experience and insights on this topic. A little bit about me. I live and work in The Hague together with my girlfriend. And what I enjoy most is hanging out at our beautiful beaches, doing all kinds of sports like tennis or boxing. And as you mentioned, I work at Outside Inc. as an innovation architect. What we do at Outside Inc. is we help innovators to shape future-proof solutions and future-proof organizations. So our services help teams to take the right steps in the ambiguity of transition areas, like, for example, the energy transition. And we help organizations ask the right questions, act on meaningful insights, and implement change agendas.
All right. So could you maybe make this a bit more concrete with an example of what you do?
For example, we help an NGO to design an innovation methodology, including a tool set. This enables them and their employees to really start with explorative projects and tackle wicked problems that they face. Or another example is we design and facilitate an open innovation program in which employees and startups dive into the world of cleaners to find out what keeps them from building up a pension, and eventually we help them prototype solutions for this issue.
Well, that sounds like a great variety of projects and themes to work with. But if I understand correctly, the core of your work always relates to innovation, right?
Yeah.
Could you maybe shortly tell us about your own understanding of this concept of innovation?
Yeah, it's true that I encounter a lot of different topics in my work. I think innovation, in essence, is about the development of new ideas, products, or services, or processes. And it comes down to that innovation is kind of the bridge between our imagination and the real world. So I really look at it as a creative space.
Okay, interesting. So let's dive a bit deeper in the topic of creativity you mentioned. As is often said, creativity is an important skill or element within innovation. But why is that? And what do we actually mean by creativity, or what do you mean by creativity?
For me, creativity is about your ability to create something new. So I often think of it like a sandbox in your own mind, but also within your organization, for example. And it's a place where you can take risks without negative consequences and really try out new methods and ways to create something valuable. It's linked to the ability to open up to new insights, but also to translate insights into opportunities and new approaches. And ultimately, it's also linked to the act of making something that interacts with the world. So it's not just the ideas or the imagination, it's also linking it to the real world. And I think it can be expressed in multiple ways. So you can see it in processes. Creativity is also a mindset. You can also look at it as a behavior or a set of behaviors. Of course, we know creativity from art, like music or movies or paintings. But creative things you can also encounter in a speech. You can encounter creativity in a product or in a service design. I think what it comes down to for me is that creative thoughts are the engine that really drive innovation. So the act of making ideas and concepts into reality.
So when or why do we need creativity?
You especially need creativity in situations where you face unfamiliar things. So new contacts, new problems, new insights. When you need to explore instead of exploit. So when you really need to do new things instead of just do business as usual. For example, a complex problem like climate change, but of course also the global COVID-19 pandemic that we are facing now. That's a good example of a situation in which you cannot just rely on what you already know. But I think the need for creativity can also be very small, like when you're trying to, for example, solve a Rubik's Cube, or when you're playing a board game with your friends. That's also where creativity comes into play. An example of creativity is the Falcon X rocket. People will be familiar with it, I think. Instead of only designing a rocket to lift off and reach outer space, think about how to make it land so it can be reused. It's good to notice that an innovation like that doesn't just fall from the sky. It's based on a radical insight that came from Elon Musk, really a relative outsider to the industry.
Okay, and apart from building rockets, why do we need it in our society, that creativity?
Yeah, good question. We need more and more creativity in today's society, I think, because it has become more and more complex. The things we face are increasingly complex. We add layers of complexity to the way we look at the world every day. And I would still argue that we always need creativity.
And why is that?
Well, simply because as individuals and organizations, we always face a changing surrounding.
Mm-hmm.
We try our best to simplify reality by making strategies and smart economic models and such. But in the end, there is really very little that we can predict about the future. So we need to incorporate uncertainty into our systems and then still show courage to make a move forward.
So a question that arises from my side now is, are all people creative?
A big yes. So yes, everybody is creative. Don't buy into the myth of the lone genius working away in isolation, waiting for great ideas to strike from above.
Because that's the image we often have, right?
Yeah, that's the myth that we kind of keep alive by sharing these kinds of stories. I really believe, I'm convinced that everyone can be creative, and the challenge of any individual or organization should be to tap into its pool of creativity. And that really helps to make innovation a way of life, really. And there's lots of myths about creativity, and there's lots of things that people tell themselves and each other. For example, that creativity is a one-trick pony, so once you're creative, then you can just apply the same set of rules or do the same things, and it will keep coming at you.
Yeah.
Or that it's a rabbit out of a hat, so it's just something that pops up, and then you have to grasp your opportunity or your chance. And also, a lot of people really believe that creativity is something that is given to you at birth or not.
Yeah.
But I would really like to stress that the liberating truth is it's a skill that you can train.
And how come that some people don't feel like they're creative then?
Yeah, we often have traumas, I think, from the past that hinder us even when we're mature. For example, a teacher or a fellow student that told you when you were young that something you created wasn't good enough or beautiful, a drawing or something that you built. And the same goes, I think, for being intelligent. People frame it as a given or a static thing. Well, in fact, it's a really dynamic thing, especially creativity.
Yeah, I can relate to that. I was actually lucky. I had a talent for drawing when I was little, so I got immediately the stamp of being a creative person. But I've also seen how that has an impact the other way around. And that's actually sad because, as you said, I truly do believe that we all have that potential and that it is a skill you can train. And that is definitely not something about being artistic, but moreover about having a certain mindset, right?
Yeah, definitely. I think it's a good example, and of course, the example also works the other way around of people being told, "Hey, that doesn't look good, so you're not creative," and you can kind of take that with you your whole life, and not re-examine if it's really true. I always really like the example of Leonardo da Vinci. He's widely considered to be one of the most genius humans that have ever walked the earth. And I'm not going to argue that. He definitely was. But you could also argue that he was blessed with many talents. And at the same time, you can say that everyone can learn a lot from looking at his behaviors and mindset. So not just taking it as, okay, he was a genius, so, well, lucky for him and I'm not. But if we look at his behaviors and mindset, he did not just paint the Mona Lisa, invent the diving suit, the parachute, or design a winged flying machine by staring at a piece of paper. He had an insatiable drive to understand how things worked.
Mm-hmm.
He observed dragonflies and all kinds of birds and horses for years and years just to study their movement. So what I'm saying is he had the mindset of a child that was discovering the world around him, and he was willing to question the status quo. It wasn't like he came up with these ideas out of the blue. He really put work and effort into it.
Yeah. So curiosity is actually needed within creativity then, right?
Yeah, so that's the part about the mindset, really. Like, it's not just a given. Of course, you can also train your curiosity about things. You can try to look at things like Leonardo da Vinci and other people do, just being really curious about how things work. So that's something you can train.
Yeah. Okay, so taking this to a more professional level, so to say, how do you use creativity in your work?
Yeah, in lots of ways. But let's say creativity is often associated with coming up with new ideas and brainstorming. A lot of people, when we do our job and we work at organizations, they feel like, oh, we're going to do creative things, so we're probably going to think of new ideas and do wild brainstorms. But creativity is really as much about diverging, so creating choices, which is a brainstorm basically, as about converging, so making choices. And for each, it is important to create the right conditions to succeed. So creativity is not a eureka moment that suddenly strikes you out of nowhere. It's a process of small steps taken with clear intention and a lot of focus.
Yeah, so that's how you incorporate it in your daily work, basically.
Yeah. And so our work is a lot of thinking about the right design for a session or the right design for a program that really sets the conditions for people to either think of a lot of new ideas, but also make choices, so select ideas or make tough choices about the needs to get into a next phase. So it's not only about coming up with brilliant ideas, it's also about making sure that you take the right steps, and that also sometimes means that you have to make choices.
Yeah, it's also creating focus in a way.
Yeah.
Yeah. So you mentioned earlier that we all have this creative potential, but how can one unleash or increase its creative potential?
As mentioned before in the example of Leonardo da Vinci, you can train behaviors, so playfulness, but also being passionate at your job. And it might sound weird, but really asking yourself, okay, what's the thing that drives me? And at an organization level, what is the thing, the mission that really drives us to do what we do? And playfulness, for example, you can just think of new ways to approach a problem. So a lot of organizations are stuck in the ways that they've been used to. And like a small thing, like just approaching a meeting in a different way can radically change the outcome of that meeting. And also, dare to be unusual, rebel against things that are about the ways that the things are supposed to work.
Yeah. So if we have listeners who want to be more creative specifically in their work, what advice would you give them?
I would say surround yourself with things that might challenge your thinking or opinions. For example, read a different newspaper once in a while, call somebody instead of automatically writing a long email, visit the places or people you work for or that use your product or service. So do a field trip, for example, but also try to build something or visualize something before writing a long, polished document about it.
Which happens quite often
Which happens quite a lot. And if you come to think of it and you really reflect on that, a lot of things are just the way that we do a lot of things just because we have been doing it for a long time like that. And that doesn't mean it's valuable anymore.
Yeah, so break out of our habits in a way.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. Okay, so as we've heard so far, I think it can truly be said that you are a creativity expert. Are there still things you are curious about or interested in?
Yeah, definitely. There's a lot of things I don't know about creativity yet. I'm just constantly learning about it myself. And a topic that I'm very much interested in at the moment is how we can benefit from creativity in designing strategies at organizations. Often we approach strategy, so you could say making wise choices, in a very technical way. For example, we design all kinds of economic models based on historical data, which makes sense in a way, of course, but I'm exploring how strategy can be based more on design thinking and principles of design thinking. For example, like starting at the core of a problem, articulating the right question, going through a bunch of possible approaches before doing a lot of research or assigning big budgets, which happens a lot. So a big thing that's happening these days is data-based decision making, which is of course a smart thing because you want to base your decisions on things that you can actually rely on. But at the same time, it can also mean that you can kind of stare at data all day, but that can also make you blind for things that are changing in the surroundings or other ways of getting to know what a wise decision could be.
Yeah, so if I would rephrase it in my own words, learning how not to control everything from the start, but also making room for mistakes and experiments, right?
Yeah, that as well. That's a good point. So,
well, that sounds interesting and challenging at the same time for
definitely.
Organizations.
Yeah, and that kind of links back to what we talked about before. We try to control reality, right? We try to fit it into models so we can make predictions. And I think a big thing in creativity is accepting that we can't know everything, and definitely not with the tools that we have now. So the tools that we use to make strategy, for example, are outdated the day that they are invented. And I think it kind of humbles you in a way if you just start by thinking, hey, what do I not know already? Is that important enough to figure out before we start designing a strategy?
Yeah, I think that's a nice phrase to end this episode with, accepting that we do not know everything.
Yeah, we cannot. And I mean, history is at our side. So people that thought that the world was flat ages ago, they've been proven wrong. And so there's a long list of assumptions that we had that just didn't make sense at the end.
Well, thanks, Alwin. I've just one last question for you. just out of curiosity
Yeah.
and to wrap things up, what has been the latest innovation in your own daily life?
I think when COVID-19 started getting into the way of our visions of the future and our daily life, I started meditating quite soon, just to get a little bit, a moment of peace and rest in my day at the start and at the end of my day. And it really was more like a process innovation, you could say. So it's a habit that I didn't have, and it really changed the way that I go into my day and that I finish my day. And it gives me a sense of rest in a surrounding that is very hectic. But that's an example of something that I changed in my life that had a really radical effect on how I go through my day.
Well, I think that is a nice spark of inspiration to conclude this episode with. Thank you so much for joining us today, Alwin. I hope it inspired our listeners to actually believe in their creative potential and maybe also to start training with it or experimenting with it. And I wish you all the best with your own upcoming innovation projects.
Yeah, thank you very much, Nadia. And the best to all the students and everybody that's listening in.
In the upcoming talk, I will discuss the smelly business of waste with a waste management expert. I hope you will join me again.
Thank you for listening. We hope these conversations provided you a glimpse into the world's wicked environmental problems and creative solutions. Think about what resonated with you the most. Would you change anything within your daily life? And what would you explore further in the field of sustainability and innovation?
We dare you to stay curious, creative, and innovative, designing a better future together.